Into the first match here of day 2 between Eric and Chongjun. This is going to be extremely exciting. So the leads are going to be jumping out any second for us now. And on the battlefield, we have got Charizard paired up with the Grimmsnarl for Chongjun, and for Eric, it's going to be, oh, look at that, it's Charizard and Grimmsnarl as well. And I think Grimmsnarl is going to be the Pokemon to watch.
Yeah, and you've got to wonder what options both Grimmsnarls have. Like we've already mentioned, is there Fake Out there? Because if there is Fake Out, you can stop the opposing Grimmsnarl for at least one turn, or are they just going to go straight for speed control, the screen support? And you've also got to be a bit wary on what the items of the Charizard are. Do they hold the Charty Berry? Because Charizard does have access to the move Ancient Power, so it can max potentially and go for that attack, but we're seeing Chongjun just switch it out here, just to be a bit safer, preserve it for later in this match.
Yeah, keeping the Charizard safe and sound in the back and bringing the Incineroar out into the fray. Throwing an Intimidate down, but it's not really too valid in this situation. But having that Fake Out could be useful. But Charizard's going to be slowed down right out of the blocks here by that Thunder Wave. So not only going to have its speed drop, but has the chance for paralysis. The Grimmsnarl on Eric's side is going to go on the offensive a little bit and go for a Spirit Break. And does actually a decent chunk of damage. That's over a third on the opposing Grimmsnarl, leaving it a little bit weak and susceptible to something from this Charizard, like the Hurricane. That does connect. Not enough to pick up the KO, though, but another Spirit Break is going to finish it off.
Yeah, that's a nice play here. You know, Eric taking the paralysis from that Thunder Wave on his Charizard, making it a little less effective if he does want to go for that Gigantamax with it later on in this match, in particular against something like Groudon or the opposing Charizard, because then it isn't really going to be able to get an attack off before the opposing Pokemon can potentially knock it out. So a little bit risky, and you've always got that chance of it not being able to move for a turn now, but getting the damage onto the opposing Grimmsnarl, you can see where Eric's going here. He's wanting to remove that support option from Chongjun's side of the field as soon as he can, really concentrating down on that side of the field, knowing there's no Protect here. Obviously, you've got to be aware now of the Fake Out that's present with that Incineroar, so as we're seeing, he is going to be adjusting.
Yeah, and a similar adjustment here. Charizard retreats in favor of the Incineroar. So throwing that Intimidate down, that will be critical against the Incineroar on Chongjun's side, and apply Fake Out pressure going into this next turn. So both of the players really focusing down on that board positioning. Eric deciding to not go for another Spirit Break, deciding to capitalize on this turn and going for that Reflect, as is the Grimmsnarl on Chongjun's side. So both of them setting up their physical defenses. Very wise when you look at the two restricted pairs being physical attackers, and Incineroar is going to get in on out of there from Chongjun's side. So it's joined the field for one turn, leaving after another turn, and this does give Chongjun the perfect opportunity to bring in something from the back, like potentially the, Groudon. You could apply some good damage with the Precipice Blades here.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, you could bring the Groudon in, and it's probably the better option than the Charizard, because if we do see the Charizard come out, we could see maybe a kind of a roles reversal of the turns here, where Eric, if he does have access to that Thunder Wave, he could go for the Thunder Wave onto Chongjun's Charizard this turn and paralyze that to set up the similar sort of situation for a late game, take on getting rid of the Charizard, but we are going to see it just leave the field straight away.
I think it heard you there, Lee, and is like, I don't want to take a Thunder Wave. I'm going to bring Incineroar back in, and I actually quite like this kind of bait here as well, because if it is something like a Thunder Wave, Incineroar being a dark type is going to be immune to those Prankster moves. So a really nice switch in here. We're going to see another switch, actually, a double switch on Chongjun's side, and it's going to be the Groudon joining the field. So we've now got all 4 Pokemon on Chongjun's side confirmed. Zization has been left on the bench, as well as our little Gastrodon. But I think it's a good position to have Groudon in here. Grimmsnarl's going to go for the light screen anyway, knowing that the Charizard's in the back, wants to set up the defensive measures, as Incineroar on Eric's side goes for the parting shot this time. So Lee, you can really see how these players are almost being cautious to deal out damage and then leave your Pokemon in a dangerous position for the following turn. They're really thinking turns ahead here.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you're not taking any big risks early on. You don't want to Gigantamax with your Charizard too early. You don't want to Dynamax with anything before you've got your board position set and you're kind of happy to start putting damage on the field. Very tentative first turns, just setting up their board states here from both players. As we see the Charizard hit the field again for Eric, and the sun is now up, but that Charizard in a little bit of a trickier position now, being paralyzed, of course.
Yeah, of course, Charizard wants to use its solar power ability and boost up those fire type moves while the sun is on the field, but in the paralyzed state, we know what I'm trying to say. Yeah. It's difficult for it, because if you Dynamax and then get fully paralyzed, you're wasting a turn of Dynamax and leaving yourself so vulnerable in the face of something like a Groudon that could be carrying, something like a Stone Edge that could then, just wipe that Charizard off the battlefield.
Yeah, that's it. But if you are Eric and you do go for the Gigantamax here, you are holding something like a Charty Berry, it gives you a little bit more security to allow you to go for that Gigantamax and try and get that Wildfire onto the field and start really that ball rolling
Yes.
with the residual damage, you know.
We talked about this a lot yesterday, Lee, about that residual damage, and I think it is that high-risk, high-reward for Eric. Go for the Dynamite and get off the Wildfire if you can. Stone Edge comes out, does connect, but isn't going to be able to pick up the KO. However, the Charizard is going to be revealing it's holding the weakness policy. This has been such a shift in the metagame, and I love seeing it on the Charizard here. Potting Shot comes in and will reduce its special attack by 1 stage. I believe now leaving it at just +1. So it will still be hitting really heavy with something like the Wildfire.
Yeah, but when +1 coming out onto that Groudon,
Oh.
it is going to be able to remove it. I don't think even an Assault Vest will be able to save the Groudon now. But there's always the risk of it being paralyzed because of that the paralysis status that it has got on it. So hopefully Eric can get an attack off as we see a Spirit Break come out from the Grimmsnarl.
Oh, nice
and
catch.
it's a really nice catch onto that Charizard to reduce its special attack, make it less effective going into this next turn.
Yeah, and Charizard breaks through the paralysis and goes for the G-Max Wildfire onto that opposing Groudon. It is a one-hit KO. Charizard just demonstrating why it is one of the most devastating Pokemon out there.
Yeah, and just taking that big threat of the Groudon completely out of the battle. And you think, okay, well, if that is the only thing I do with my Charizard here, I'm happy with that. I've got Eric's got his own Groudon potentially in the back to come in and help him deal with the Charizard on Chongjun's side of the field, and he's got his Grimmsnarl out now to potentially disrupt Chongjun's Charizard with some sort of speed control that Eric's been subjected to already.
I mean, Charizard's if it wasn't paralyzed, it would be in such a great position here because you don't have to worry about going for a G-Max Wildfire anymore. You've already got that set up, and it's not going to affect the fire types on the field anyway. But depending on the move pool, if it is running something like H and Power, it can go for that max Rockfall and do so much damage to either of the Pokemon on Chongjun's side. But it is at such low HP, and it is slower thanks to that paralysis. So Chongjun's in a position to capitalize on that disadvantage and try and pick up a KO.
Yeah, that's it. And I think, you know, if you're able to just land anything onto the opposing Charizard, it just helps you preserve a bit of health for the rest of your team. The Incineroar's not going to worry too much. Well, other than the Rockfall, it would come out and it will do a lot of damage. But you do have that Fake Out here that we are going to see, and it will stop that Grimmsnarl from supporting with any sort of speed control this turn. Yeah,
I really like that play. You know you're going to outspeed that Charizard, so let's just stop the Grimmsnarl from getting up to any prankster tricks. But you can see how the weakness policy really benefited on Eric's side, and I believe as well there was a light screen up on that side. So able to survive the G-Max Wildfire as the Rockfall does indeed come out. It's going to overwrite the weather, but I think critically it gets the KO.
Yeah, it picks up the big knockout. The survival there on the Grimmsnarl as well, you know, just showing the light screen support that you said, you know, mentioned is so critical early on, allowing the Grimmsnarl to stay on the field. And then the Charizard survival as well. That's the big thing here, where it is able to get that attack off, that huge attack, and pick up a knockout in return and take the pretty much the two big Pokemon that Chongjun's going to utilize in this match for that offensive damage off the field. And Eric sitting there now, pretty happy with his Charizard, even though it is paralyzed still on the field.
Yeah, I mean, what an amazing turnaround there for Eric. I was convinced that Charizard was going to go down if Chongjun had targeted into it, but you know, it was able to get that KO with the Max Rockfall and a good reveal as well, you know, carrying something like that Ancient Power just to be able to deal with other Charizards that can be so disruptive makes this mirror a little bit more interesting if you have a way to deal with it. Incineroar's coming back onto the field now for Chongjun, and again, it's looking a little bit difficult. Charizard's got very dwindled HP, and these Incineroars still looking reasonably healthy.
Yeah, and that's it. And you know, if Eric's got something like the Groudon, like we suspect in the back, it's able. You realize you just want your Charizard to go down now. If you get any damage off onto the opposing Grimmsnarl, it's a bonus. But you kind of just want your Groudon to come in fresh, not take any damage, and then just pressure with that Precipice Blades, which should help close the game up for him at this point. It's going to be very difficult for Chongjun with very little offensive pressure on the field at the moment.
Exactly, and I think you could just see Chongjun go for the fake out. That isn't gonna work, but it's maybe just thinking ahead towards that game two. The Charizard goes for the G-Max, Max Airstream, and is going to be able to boost up the speed as well. As Foul Play will come out from the opposing Grimmsnarl here, but Charizard hanging on. I mean, things look so difficult for this Charizard getting paralyzed so early on, but is able to have that longevity out in the field, and I have to really credit the way that Eric has been able to pivot around, you know, revealing only 3 Pokemon. We still don't know what that 4th one is hiding in the back, and to be able to pilot these 3 so expertly to work around Chongjun's team, to leave it to just this low HP Incineroar, I think shows how well versed and comfortable he is with this particular team.
Yeah, not revealing that fourth Pokemon is pivotal for Eric. You know, he doesn't want to give it any information that he doesn't need to away. So if he can close this up now without showing that Pokemon, it's going to be an advantage for him going into this if he is able to take game one, which we assume he is. The interesting thing from that last turn, though, that I'll just point out, Lou, is that the Grimmsnarl moved after the Charizard. The Charizard was paralyzed, so indicating maybe what item is potentially on Chongjun's Grimmsnarl going into this game 2 here, as we see Eric pick up the win there, because obviously with the paralysis, Charizard's speed is really reduced. You would expect everything on the field to outspeed it, but if a Pokemon's holding something like an Iron Ball and that trick combination that we've seen on Grimmsnarl, then that's kind of indicative and something that Eric may have picked up on that he has to be a little bit careful with going into game 2, because we've already seen the Thunder Wave, but we've never really seen too many combinations of having Thunder Wave and that kind of trick Iron Ball combination together.
Oh, well, here we go, Lee. There is a Gastrodon on the battlefield, paired up with the Incineroar for Chongjun, and on Eric's side, sticking with the Charizard and the Grimmsnarl. But I will be forever and always happy to see a Gastrodon on the field. Always
happy to see the Gastrodon. And yeah, like I said, you know, I thought both players would stick to the same, but you can see that Chongjun's changing up his game plan, bringing that Gastrodon. And I like it because I think it offers a little bit more of a threat with that yawn. You can't just, if it does start throwing yawns off onto Eric's side of the field, you can't just leave your Pokemon out there to do what the Charizard did in that game one. It gives Chongjun an option to be able to say, okay, well, you keep your Charizard on the field and you Gigantamax it. I'm going to yawn into you right now. And if you stay on the field for another turn, you're going to go to sleep, and then you're not going to utilize all the turns that you want of the Gigantamax like we saw from that first game.
I agree, and we're seeing the Charizard actually go straight for a Protect here in this turn 1. Incineroar on Chongjun's side is going to go for the parting shot, catches the Incineroar that switched in for Eric. So that Incineroar is going to have its, attack drop by a stage, almost as if it had been intimidated. But now Eric does have that fake out pressure going into the next turn as Chongjun brings in the Charizard. And you're right there, Lee, the yawn coming straight out to that Charizard, a wise Protect on Eric's side.
Yeah, really nice, yeah. But the problem is for Eric now is with the Charizard coming in on Chongjun's side of the field is he doesn't have that reflect setup like he had in that first game, so he's going to be way more susceptible to attacks from the Charizard on Chongjun's side if he does decide to go for the Gigantamax here. Yes, you've got the fake out, and of course you can kind of get around the yawn for at least one turn, but you've got to guarantee that you pick up the knockout onto that Gastrodon this turn if you do decide to go for that Gigantamax, and maybe you do go for it, because if you're slower than Chongjun's Charizard and you can get that weakness policy activated, then that can make all the difference.
Well, the Sun's going to join the battlefield. All these fire types alongside the Groudon are going to be very happy about this as Chongjun switches in the Groudon. We're also going to see a Dynamax come up here, and I believe it's going to be the Charizard on Chongjun's side of the field here.
Yeah, and if both players are Gigantamaxing their Charizards here, it will just come down to which Charizard has been trained the faster, and who can land that Max Rockfall first. If that's what the players choose to go for, which you imagine you would do. If you can stop the opposing Charizard from being able... Oh, no. Gigantamax from Eric's side as we see a Rockfall into the Charizard. And it is able to pick up the knockout. And Eric losing his Charizard here. And Chongjun taking an early lead, Lou.
Oh, I mean, devastating for Eric to lose the Charizard. It does give you a free switch to bring in something like the Groudon from the back, maybe. And then that could be a good Dynamax choice for you to try and retaliate into that opposing Charizard. Incineroar going to go for the parting shot, but it's a little bit too late here, Incineroar, because the Charizard has already been able to get that one-hit KO on the opposing Charizard, and that's a great position for Chongjun here.
Yeah, really nice. We saw how effective the Charizard on Eric's side of the field was in that game one, and now being able to remove it, it's not an issue going forward in this second game. Huge play there for Chongjun, and really setting himself up a ball position where he's able to take advantage, and, maybe almost pinning Eric down to a situation where he doesn't want to switch in something in the back because he knows how important that Pokemon's going to be. Potentially it is going to be that Groudon, but now obviously getting that parting shot off onto the Charizard is pretty huge as well, so getting something out of the turn at least. But Chongjun sitting in a really nice position here. Obviously the sun not up, so not going to be hitting as hard as it would have been, but also not taking that solar power damage as well each turn, so kind of preserving a little bit of HP, although the sand is chipping away at it at the same time.
Well, Incineroar going to do what it does best and go for that fake out into the opposing Groudon as Grimmsnarl does finally set up that light screen. So Eric trying to put all these defenses preemptive measures in place in front of this Charizard that's going to go for a G-Max Wildfire here into that Grimmsnarl. Going to do just over a third of damage there. So Grimmsnarl still sitting pretty happy on the field, particularly knowing that Groudon cannot move here. So it has the potential to go for another Prankster move on that following turn. I have to say, I'm really interested that Eric is opting to still play with these 3 Pokemon, not revealing what potential restricted is in the back.
Yeah, but time's ticking down. He's going to have to bring it in and reveal it at some point, because the Grimmsnarl, we've already seen, it did take a decent amount of damage from that J-Max Wildfire the last turn, and the residual damage will be affecting it every turn, so it'll probably go down this turn. So you may want to keep it on the field, get a Reflect up, take advantage of that, or even go for some sort of speed control onto the Charizard before it does finally go down, and try and get a parting shot off onto maybe something like the Charizard one last time before you do bring in something like what we expect to be the Groudon in the back.
I mean, speaking of speed control, that Charizard has now been hit with a Thunder Wave as Precipice Blades does come out and connect on both Pokemon. It's not enough to pick up the KO against Grimmsnarl, but it will go down at the end of this turn thanks to all the residual damage on the field. As Charizard follows up into that Incineroar with a max Airstream. So Precipice Blades not able to get, significant damage on that Incineroar thanks to the Sugar Berry, an item that is still being featured here in Day 2, and the double up is going to, keep the Incineroar on the field. That it allows it to go for this parting shot. So Incineroar, I think, being quite critically able to survive that double up to allow Eric the opportunity to pivot this Pokemon out.
Yeah, and we are going to see this 4th and final Pokemon from Eric now. So I would expect it is the Groudon. The only issue bringing it in now, it is going to take a round of damage from that G-Max Wildfire, the residual damage. But getting it onto the field, it does mean that the Charizard will take some damage from that Solar Power ability as well. And the speed boost that we have seen there is handy for the Groudon on Chongjun's side, but at the same time, it's already taking an Intimidate and now a Parting Shot, so it's not going to be hitting as effective as it would have been, and we're going to see that Intimidate cycle once again, really reducing the attack power of the Groudon, and all the reliance, I feel now, is on the Groudon from Eric's side, because it's got all the work to do to pull this one back.
Yeah, all eyes are on that Groudon. But I mean, it does look a little bit difficult for Eric here. You've got the 2 Pokemon disadvantage to the 4 remaining of Chongjun, but Chongjun's Dynamax turns on that Charizard have now ended, and Eric does still have the utility to go for a Dynamax with that Groudon. Incineroar's come in, it could go for a fake out into either one of these Pokemon, allowing Groudon to potentially try and pick up a KO, maybe try and remove the Charizard. But you have to watch out for the Pokemon in the back. We know that there's that little Gastrodon.
Yeah, and I think, we are going to see the Groudon switch out because of those Parting Shots and Intimidates, just to reset those drops as we see Chongjun bring in their own Incineroar and start kind of doing the same to Eric's side of the field, taking that Groudon down to -1, as it is going to be Dynamaxing this turn. Obviously going to have the speed advantage over that Charizard that is paralyzed on Chongjun's side of the field, but whether or not Eric decides to maybe go for a max Quake into what was the Groudon slot, suspecting Incineroar to come in and maybe try and pick up a knockout there and get those special defense boosts as well, which will help against the Charizard, might be an option as well.
Incineroar's going to go for the fake out into the Charizard on Chongjun's side, as Groudon goes for a max Quake. It's going to go into the opposing Incineroar, also revealing that it too is carrying that Sugar Berry, so this is going to be doing reduced damage. It will, however, give Eric the special defense boost on his side of the field, which is good when you're facing down against this Charizard. But as you mentioned there, Lee, we know that Groudon's in the back from later, and it's going to be able to bypass those special defense boosts as it is the physical attacker.
Yeah, and it's going to be very difficult. You've got to already consider as well that, Chongjun's still got the Gastrodon in the back, and you kind of think, okay, well, yeah, as strong as Groudon is, it's only got 2 Dynamax turns left. I don't see the Gastrodon really hitting the field before those Dynamax turns finish. And although the Groudon could potentially get more special defense boosts, is it really going to be able to beat out Gastrodon, especially because it's got something like Recover and Yawn as a combination to kind of get around how bulky the Groudon is? But completely wrong again, as the Gastrodon does hit the field.
Yeah, and Groudon avoids the attack here. I believe that was the Hurricane coming out from the Charizard as the Max Quake comes out, connects down on that opposing Gastrodon. But you can see how bulky the Gastrodon is. It's able to take that really well. And Chongjun's just expertly pivoting in Pokemon that are going to be able to A, take those attacks well, and then B, allow the Incineroar to come in later and throw some more Intimidates down. The Flare Blitz comes out as well, does a little bit of chip damage away to that Gastrodon, but Chongjun really does have all the utilities now to keep switching Pokemon in, out, go through the Dynamax turns of Eric, and making sure that that Incineroar can be disruptive with more Intimidate. So it really is a game now where Chongjun just has to keep playing through the pieces, bring Pokemon in, and whittle away at the Groudon and Incineroar on Eric's side.
Yeah, and it is going to be difficult. The Gastrodon coming in here, I didn't expect it because I felt like maybe we want to preserve it for later on in this game, keep it as healthy as possible to utilize those yawns. But at the same time, you can see what Chongjun's doing. He's got a great game plan here, and he's wanting to just cycle these Intimidates to really weaken the Groudon. Maybe you go for a Protect on your Gastrodon here, switch your Charizard out potentially. That is an option, but, you know, to get a free Intimidate in, prevent any other damage. But we do see the Blast Burn connect here, but with the special defense boosts and the light screen on top of that, not doing very much at all.
Exactly, and it could well have been the Blast Burn from the previous turn. I was checking my notes over here, but I think Chongjun is playing this really, really well. You know, just going for that damage, chipping away. There's not a lot that Eric can do to pick up the KOs in this situation, particularly if, you know, Chongjun is choosing the correct protects so that the max boots aren't going to be dealing as much damage potential as they are capable of doing. And you kind of see this endgame situation in Game 2, where Groudon and Incineroar, they can't switch out, they can't reset. This is the only HP they've got remaining to them, you know. We've seen the Sugar Berry on the Incineroar, but I have to credit the Groudon being able to take all of these special attacks.
Yeah, and with the special defense boost, you know, is obviously indicative of its item, I think, as well. You know, if it is stacking with something like an Assault Vest here, it is going to be able to kind of brush those off pretty easily. But this is the big question. He is able to pick up the knockout onto Gastrodon here, which is pretty big. So, you know, the Charizard not able to move this turn because of that Blast Burn. It has to take a turn of recharge, so you don't really need to worry about it here until that next turn. Sun's ending now, so it's not going to be as powerful. You've already got the special defense boost. So Eric, sitting in not a bad position, but with the Groudon hitting the field again, you've got the Sun reactivated, and this Groudon's pretty healthy, and there's no Intimidate options here for Eric to rely on. He can potentially try and get a parting shot off, but you're relying now on a Precipice Blades miss.
Yeah, that's true. And Charizard, you know, it hasn't got a lot of HP remaining, but if it's able to get a move off, it's going to be able to deal some damage and just keep chipping away. But it's just going to be switching out, and I really like this play by Chongjun, just going through the motions and bringing in that Incineroar, knowing the Intimidate is going to be beneficial to weakening Eric's position. And I would really think at this point, if I'm the players, I might be starting to think towards that Game 3. Yeah,
and you're really relying, I think, if you are Eric now, you need to try and fish for a critical hit with the Precipice Blades to get the damage that you need onto the board. If you can remove the Groudon, solo health though now, and yeah, and that is a huge hit on both. Double critical hit. Just talking about critical hits. Not.
You did it again, Lee.
I'm cursed. Caster's curse, yeah, but yeah, this puts the game back in all favour of Chongjun. He's going to tie the set up, which is great for everyone at home. Obviously, not for the players, because we are going to go to a Game 3. They probably wanted it over by now, but this has been an incredible set. And even if the critical hit hadn't happened there, you've got that fake out support that Chongjun's, you know, brought onto the field now, going to be able to utilize. And as I was going to say, with the Assault Vest, the Groudon didn't really have an option that next turn, but to take another Precipice Blades from Chongjun's side. So tying it up.
One apiece.
What a set so far.
I mean, I think those critical hits it was more Groudon kind of showing off, I think, at that point. They didn't matter too much at the end game state. But I think as well, with a move like Precipice Blades, you do often run that risk of not connecting. Gastrodon, I think, was such a great adjustment for Chongjun. I would love to see it back. And there we go. It's on the battlefield, paired up with the Incineroar. And, you know, Eric is sticking to that Game 1 and Game 2 strategy of the Charizard and the Grimmsnarl. But, again, you're in this predicament, like you were talking about, the pressure that Gastrodon has with the Yawn.
Yeah, and it's the same kind of situation here. You've got fake out pressure from Chongjun's side with the Incineroar to prevent the Grimmsnarl from attacking here. You've also got the threat of a potential parting shot as well. But there is the switch that Eric could make, potentially a Grimmsnarl out into Groudon, get the Sun up, and then hope that you've got enough in attack with your Charizard to take down the Gastrodon. The only question I would have is how invested is that Charizard? With the weakness policy, you'd think it's more invested on a defensive side, so it's able to take hits to get that boost initially before it is able to fire attacks off. So Gastrodon already a defensive Pokemon, hard to take down in one hit, so you might see a bit more of a slower start to this game, as we're seeing here with that Incineroar switch in.
Exactly, going for the protect and switch in here, just playing a little defensively on Eric's side. The Incineroar on Chongjun's side, able to catch that Incineroar once again. I believe this is playing out almost identically to how Game 2 started. Able to get the parting shot on the opposing on the Incineroar, and is able to now bring a Pokemon in from the back. If the Gastrodon decides to go for a Yawn into that Charizard slot, we will be seeing an identical play out of that Game 2, and that's exactly what's happening. I mean, it got Chongjun into that victory in Game 2, so I can completely understand why you'd be wanting to go through the same motions.
Yeah, and now Chongjun's in that position again where he's able, we know that the speeds of the two Charizards here, where Chongjun's going to be able to get an attack off first. Whether or not Eric decides here to potentially go for something like the Gigantamax this turn, because he didn't go for it in that second game. He inevitably was unable to take that big attack, the big max rockfall. Whether or not he's able to go for the Gigantamax himself and take that, get the weakness policy boost, and then take out the Charizard the next turn. But you've got the kind of cushion here of that fake out from the Incineroar to stop the Yawn from the Gastrodon, or you've got the simple thing where you can just switch it out, get your Grimmsnarl in like he's doing, take it a bit slower, and try and get those screens set up to set that Charizard up for a later game.
Yeah, I love that thinking, actually. You know, realizing the Charizard needs to stay safe in the back in this turn. You don't want to make the same mistake again. And bringing in that Grimmsnarl that is likely going to be able to take an attack. You know, there's no Sun set up on the field as well. Solar Power's not activated on that Charizard. And like you said, Lee, set up something like the Light Screen to help that Charizard when it comes back into the battlefield and possibly Gigantamax it then. It's going to be the G-Max Wildfire on Chongjun's side, though, going to connect onto the opposing Grimmsnarl. So I think predicting a strong switch there, knowing something was going to come in from the back. And this is such a bad situation for Eric because it's done so much damage, and the residual damage will pick up the KO on that Grimmsnarl at the end of this turn. Once again, Incineroar going for the parting shot, catches the Charizard, but it is too little too late once again, because the damage that G-Max Wildfire did, even outside of the stun, is critical to that Grimmsnarl, and Eric is going to lose it at the end of the turn.
Yeah, and you know, it's critical for the Grimmsnarl, for Eric, to try and get that light screen support up, so he knows that the Charizard is going to be able to, potentially if you go for the Gigantamax, take an attack a bit easier so it's able to return with some big damage. Unfortunately, like you say, really good call here from Chongjun to get that Wildfire and catch the Grimmsnarl on the switch in, take that support option away from Eric. And yeah, we do see the Gastrodon go for the Yawn, but not really too. It doesn't really matter too much. I mean, the best thing here would have been to see that Yawn into the Charizard,
I was worried.
switch in, and that would have really been difficult. But now we're back in that kind of similar situation where we've got the Charizard on Eric's side of the field, and I think he's almost forced here to go for the Gigantamax and hope that he's going to be able to take the max rockfall. It's inevitably going to come out from Chongjun's side of the field. Take this turn to potentially get the fake out onto the Gastrodon. We've got to keep in mind that the parting shot from that Incineroar is going to be quite key, I think, into that Charizard on Chongjun's side. And maybe that is enough, that drop on the special attack is enough to allow the Charizard now to be able to take an attack. But you've got to be so careful around this Gastrodon because of that Yawn threat that it is pushing out every turn now.
Yeah, I agree, and I think Charizard going, I don't really want to face down against these two Pokemon. Let's bring Groudon onto the field. This could be dangerous, you know, setting up the Sun for something like the opposing Charizard, but thankfully for the Groudon, it's going to be going just straight for a max guard here, as Gastrodon also goes for a Protect. And this makes a lot of sense, because Eric had the potential to go for something like the Fake Out, and then a max Rockfall into that opposing Charizard. And even if Chongjun's was faster, like you said, the parting shot could really pay off and allow Eric's Charizard to survive that hasn't got a drop and could retaliate with a max rockfall and pick up a KO. So really nice defensive plays from Chongjun, and Eric again in a position here where, sure, the Groudon's applying pressure, but you have now set up the Sun for that Charizard, and we've seen how much damage that Charizard can do to a Groudon.
Yeah, and that's a problem. Like, you can now, if you want, if you're Eric, you can Dynamax the Groudon, but it kind of defeats the point of taking advantage of your Charizard, which was so effective for him in that game one, and we've seen how effective it is for Chongjun. But Eric doing a good job to not really allow Chongjun to get much of a return here. The Grimmsnarl has gone down, so that is a huge kind of turn for him. But other than that, Eric's still got 3 pretty healthy Pokemon in a position. But without the kind of light screen support here, you do worry about that Groudon. If it doesn't Dynamax here, how much damage is it really going to take from something like the Charizard with that Sun boost?
Yeah, if you're Eric right now, I would just be trying to burn through these Dynamax turns of the Charizard. Incineroar's going to go for the Fake Out, but of course it's going to fail here, as Charizard goes for the G-Max Wildfire into the opposing Groudon, and it's not enough to pick up the KO, but of course the residual damage is going to be able to finish it off. It is able to retaliate with the Stone Edge, but not picking up the KO. I mean, Charizard has been kind of the highlight Pokemon throughout this entire set on both sides of the battlefield. You know, Eric piloted it so well in game 1, but then it's almost like the Charizard on Chongjun's side has gone, hey, I see what you can do, I can do it better. And it's just being so strong, picking up KOs left, right, and center. And I think Chongjun seems to be running it, you know, very, very fast and offensive.
Yeah, and now it is the end of the Gigantamax turns for Chongjun. The Charizard's done an incredible job at whittling down Eric's side of the field. But Eric now in a position where he has got that Charizard, still pretty healthy, in a position where he can Gigantamax at this turn. There's obviously active Fake Out from Chongjun's side from that Incineroar, but it's really tricky here, because does Chongjun go for an attack to proc the weakness policy on the Charizard? Probably not. You probably don't want to activate that. You probably, I think your main goal here is to try and get a parting shot into the Charizard, whereas Eric could maybe stall things out and, yeah, like we see, go for the Protect here to get around this Fake Out and try and get a parting shot onto the opposing Charizard one last turn, so you've got at least an active Fake Out to come back in to support your own Charizard when it does max.
Yeah, the HM power is actually going to go down into the opposing Incineroar, do a little bit of damage against it, and obviously work around something like the Sugar Berry. That's what I love about having the Rock-type moves on there. Incineroar's just going to do a little bit of damage with the Flare Blitz, so really in this turn, not too much damage is being dealt, except Charizard to itself, with that, you know, solar power damage as well. But this does give Chongjun a great position to bring in a Pokemon from the back. Yeah,
and now the momentum's swinging slightly more in Eric's favor. But again, it's all about, can you take down the Gastrodon? Does the Gastrodon on Chongjun's side have Protect? Because it would allow you a turn to maybe protect the Gastrodon, take a big G-Max attack from the Charizard if Eric decides to go that route, and then get a parting shot off with your Incineroar. But has the Charizard, if it does go for the Gigantamax here, got enough to target down, predict that Plague, get rid of the Incineroar to avoid the parting shot? But doing that, it's a double-edged sword, because then you're leaving yourself exposed to a potential yawn that could come out. It's a really difficult situation, but it's all going to be about what Eric decides to do in this one turn.
Yeah, you have to pull in all that wisdom and experience you have as a Pokemon trainer and call this turn correctly. Charizard's going to go for the max Airstream down into the opposing Incineroar. It's not enough to pick up the KO against it. It's just on about 32 hit points remaining, possibly a double up. Using that Incineroar is going to be able to, you know, close out the KO, but then that Gastrodon is going to be up to a few tricks. We see the Flare Blitz come out from the Incineroar. It is going to go into the opposing Incineroar and will get the KO, but like you said, Lee, it's this kind of catch-22. The Gastrodon is now in a prime position to go for something like the Yawn and put one of Eric's Pokemon to sleep on that following turn. All Chongjun needs now is a double Protect on this next turn, or, you know, both Pokemon to protect, and then Charizard is going to be taking a nap and not able to capitalize on the Gigantamax.
Yeah, the one thing you can say is here that, you know, the Gastrodon can protect this next turn, but if the Groudon on Chongjun's side has that Assault Vest, it's not going to have access to it. It is going to be able to take special attacks a lot better, and there's no weakness policy activated on the Charizard, but it's got one turn to get the G-Max Wildfire off, and that might be the difference here, getting it into the Groudon. Oh, and doing huge damage.
It does so much damage, and I think as well a double up will be able to close out against this opposing Groudon. You can see the Incineroar nice and speedy thanks to that Airstream boost, able to get the KO. So now it is little Gastrodon against both the Charizard and the Incineroar. And, you know, Gastrodon, it may be our champion Pokemon, you know, but it's certainly got a bit of an uphill struggle here. It's going for the Earth Power into the opposing Incineroar, but it's really not able to deal out the damage thanks to that Sugar Berry. And now, you know, yes, Charizard's going to have to take a little bit of a nap, but I don't know what Gastrodon's going to be able to do here.
Yeah, normally carrying options like Earth Power, which is not going to be effective against the Charizard because of its flying type attack, and Ice Beam as well, which is not, you know, going to be hitting it for neutral damage, so not doing enough, really. And you've also got the fact is that that Airstream was timed perfectly from Eric earlier on in this game, where he's Incineroar undoubtedly will outspeed majority of things left on Chongjun's side of the field. The double up there, you identified it. It's making sure to get rid of the Groudon, so it's not a problem anymore. And the fact here is he can go for a parting shot, but actually revealing Protect here on the Incineroar, huge reveal, and stalling out the turns, allowing Charizard the time to hopefully wake up.
Absolutely love seeing the Protect on the Incineroar. Again, a move pool option that has been rising in popularity ahead of the World Championships, and you can see why. It does allow you the opportunity to buy some time with that Incineroar. And Charizard coming out of its Dynamax turns now, it has obviously taken a turn of sleep here, so it's going to be waking up very soon, and you can see how much HP it's got remaining. Gastrodon, I mean, we've seen it have Yawn, we've seen it with Earth Power, Protect, that fourth move. Unless it's got a good way to deal with Charizard, paired up with the residual damage from the G-Max Wildfire, there's not a lot that Gastrodon can do.
Yeah, you're kind of hoping if you are Chongjun, you've got some sort of option like Recover here, and that would really help out. But we are just seeing a Flare Blitz come out from the Incineroar, getting a little bit more damage on, because the G-Max Wildfire residual damage is going to be so important to kind of help close this one up, as we do see an Earth Power. It is going to be enough, and the Incineroar going down. But Charizard taking another turn of sleep here, so these turns aren't going to be like, got one more turn potentially, or it could wake up. The sun leaving the field, though, is a really important thing for Eric as well, because these Hurricanes will be a little bit more accurate than they would have been in that direct sunlight, where, you know, you don't really want to be hitting that attack in with the sun on the field. But now that is probably the best option that we've seen from Eric to be able to utilize against the Gastrodon. So with the G-Max Wildfire residual damage and a Hurricane, it might be enough to pick up the knockout.
Yeah, I really like that point there about the Hurricane. I mean, it's an inaccurate move at the best of times, but even more so in the sun. So it's nice for Charizard to have a little bit of a less risk to connect in that regard, and I think it's the good move choice to go down against this Gastrodon. You're going to be dealing decent damage, and you obviously get the chance as well to potentially confuse that opposing Gastrodon.
Yeah, and you see the Protect there. The Charizard is now awake. It's going to be, you know, taking potentially a Yawn this turn, but is the combination of a Hurricane. Oh, it misses, it misses, and the Yawn coming out here. So the match is going to be going on a little bit longer here for both players, and Chongjun doing everything he can to make sure that this Gastrodon is fighting back as hard as it can not to lose against this Charizard. So now it can go for a Protect, the Charizard will fall to sleep, and it will all come down to how many turns of sleep this Charizard has, and does Gastrodon have enough offensively to take it down before it is able to wake up again.
I mean, we can see what it's doing here, right? It's trying to capitalize on those opportunities, get the Yawn, and using the leftovers as well to get that little bit of recovery, trying to put itself in a good position to potentially keep healing as those Charizard turns of sleep are happening, and also potentially as the Hurricane turns miss in the future. But from Eric's perspective, you just know exactly what you need to do. You need to wake up, and Ice Beam is the fourth move revealed on the Gastrodon. Let's see how much it does. Ooh, a little bit of damage. You know, if you can keep logging them up in succession, you are eventually going to be able to get KO. But if Charizard's able to wake up, hit those Hurricanes, then Gastrodon's going to be in a difficult spot. But Charizard does wake up.
Gets that Hurricane off and see how much damage this does. It does a good amount of damage, so maybe one more. And the confusion, that is huge, Lou. Is it going to hit itself in confusion this turn? If it does.
See. It breaks through and is able to go for the Ice Beam, and it will connect down onto that opposing Charizard. But
the freeze! The freeze!
Oh my
Charizard is frozen. No way. This is insane. Crazy. So the Gastrodon here looking down and out, confused. It comes back, it hits through the confusion, gets that Ice Beam, freezes the Charizard, and it stays frozen. The Ice Beam doing about 40 HP damage each turn, roughly, and it hits through the confusion again.
Come on, little Gastrodon. It does. Oh, I think one more Ice Beam might be able to get the KO on this opposing Charizard. I mean, what a comeback for the little slug here for Chongjun's side. And I mean, if you can hear the venue, you can hear us. I am sure the casters can hear that heartbeat. Frozen again on this Charizard. Can the Gastrodon break through? Yes, and it goes for another Ice Beam.
Against all the odds, Chongjun has picked up the knockout against the Charizard. The free status there on the Charizard, enough to take it down there. Oh,
wow. I mean,
what a way to end that set, Lou.
Gastrodon, that is why you belong with me and Lee on this desk. What an absolute champion. Huge congratulations to Chongjun Peng. And I have to say, such commiserations to Eric.